In Montana, 16 young people are at the center of the first ever constitutional climate trial in U.S. history. And as we wait for the judge to issue her decision in the case, we spoke with professor and founder of the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law, Michael Gerrard, about what this decision could mean and why it's being described as a case for hope. So, Michael, for anyone who may not be familiar with Held v. Montana, can you kind of tell us about this case and why it's so significant?
So a group of young people in Montana sued the state of Montana, saying that its policies favoring fossil fuels violate the environmental rights provision of the state constitution. The Montana state constitution says that all persons have a right to a clean and healthful environment. They've gone to the state court and said that what Montana is doing, favoring coal and so forth, is unconstitutional. And for the first time ever, we had a trial on this constitutional issue of great importance.
I mean, and how long has this been in the works? I know that they've really been trying to get this in front of a judge for a while. Can you kind of explain the journey?
These kinds of cases have been going on for more than a decade. There have been at least 25 cases raising similar theories. This case was filed a couple of years ago, but this is the first one that actually has gotten to an actual trial.
And it's currently that we're still awaiting on a decision or for a ruling in this case. What are the possible scenarios?
Well, a victory by the plaintiffs would be a ruling by the judge that certain aspects of Montana law do violate the state constitution. And Montana would then presumably have to go back and modify those. The one that is specifically at issue concerns whether the climate impacts can be considered by the state when it's reviewing a fossil fuel project. Current Montana law says they can't. Now they would have to if the plaintiffs win this case.
So could we see less fossil fuel happening in Montana if a victory comes in this case?
Possibly, but all that really would be required would be that the state has to consider climate change. It doesn't mean that having considered it, they can't approve other fossil fuel projects.
Okay. So this case is really just about the state acknowledging almost. Am I correct in that?
Well, the state considering climate change as it makes these decisions. The case has much broader significance, but the narrow decision at issue is just on consideration of these issues.
Okay, so from New Jersey to Hawaii, we've seen many groups and cities and states kind of turning to the court to hold businesses or governments accountable for climate change. Is there a particular case that you're watching outside of this?
There's a trial coming up in September in Hawaii under Hawaii's state constitution, and that'll be the second trial if it goes forward on these kinds of theories. There are a lot of lawsuits pending around the country, about 25 suits brought by various states and cities against fossil fuel companies seeking money damages for climate change. We're certainly waiting to see how those move forward. There are lots of lawsuits that have been brought by red states and by industries against the Biden administration for its climate regulations. We're expecting more of those. In all, the U.S., there have been around 1,800 lawsuits concerning climate change brought in the U.S. and another 400 or so around the world. It's a very active area of litigation.
And I'm assuming this has just really exploded in the last probably 10 years, am I?
That's right, more in the last 5 or 6 years. The U.S. is the champion with around 80% of all the climate lawsuits globally, but around the world it's really been exploding.
And could you kind of give us a quick elevator pitch on the case that you're watching in Hawaii?
That's a case also brought by young people under the Hawaii Constitution against the State Department of Transportation, saying that its policies call to have more auto traffic, and we should have less auto traffic, more transit, bicycles, pedestrians.
And is there anything about these cases that you find inspiring? Like, to see these young people going to court? Does that make you feel some type of way?
It really sends the message that it's their future that is more at stake. These are often teenagers or even younger. They'll be around a long time. They will experience some of the worst impacts of climate change. Their futures are at stake, and so they have special roles to play in bringing these cases.
Awesome. Well, so if the judge rules in favor of the youth in this case, what impact do you think that would have on these other cases?
Well, I think it'd be an inspiration to potential young people and others around the country and indeed around the world, since we have never had a trial like this before. We've seen in some other cases in other parts of the world that successes there have inspired similar kind of cases. It would send a message that constitutional values are really at play here, that that there is a right to a safe, stable environment. Now, it's not written the same way in every state or every country, but many places do have that right, and everyone should share those values about the importance of a safe and stable climate.
We're going to end on this next question, but in April, the Supreme Court denied appeals from major oil companies to have their cases moved from state to federal court. In two parts. One, did that surprise you at all?
It did somewhat surprise me. There had been lots of efforts by many parties to have the cases go to federal court, which is what the oil companies wanted, but the Supreme Court didn't do that. It let them stay in state court, at least for now.
And part two, do you think this paved the way for a new wave of climate legislation set by the courts?
No, I think it's going to lead to a lot more litigation action in many courts. There are a whole lot of issues that have to be resolved before we actually see trials in those cases.
What kind of things would need to be resolved?
Well, there are questions about whether federal law, like the Clean Air Act, preempts or displaces these kinds of lawsuits. There are going to be questions about whether liability should attach to oil companies for lawful behavior. That where in the supply chain would liability attach, motor vehicle manufacturers, others. So a whole lot of questions are ahead of us.
And is there anything that you would like to add that maybe we didn't get to?
I think one reason why we're seeing so much recourse to the courts in the U.S. and around the world is that nowhere are governments doing enough to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. All the projections are we are heading to very, very dangerous territory. The people who want to fight climate change need to use every lawful tool, and going to the courts is certainly one important element in the toolbox.
Just one tool in the toolbox.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time, and if you would like to see more content like this, please like and subscribe.